Before we introduce you this week's guest, I like to read a review. This one is from Lani K. Asian Women of Power is a catalyst for healing and getting rid of stereotypes which Asian women continue to endure. Kimchi and her guests candidly discuss thought-provoking challenges which Asian women and their families face, which affects our self-esteem, dreams, aspirations, careers, family life, and more. Bravo, Kimchi, for teaching us how to live life loud. You are inspiring. Thank you, Lani K., for your kind words. What I and other coaches found is that by speaking up and sharing what we experienced in life would help us heal our wounds. Please keep listening and sharing this podcast. We appreciate your support and review. And now I have a new tool that I want to share with you. Using your cell phone, text these 4 letters, AWOP, to the number 64600. Again, text AWOP to the number 64600. You will get a link to my virtual business card brought to you by EasyCard. With that link, you have access to all podcast episodes. You can search by the guest name, by their ethnicity, or by the keyword from the episode's title. Check it out. It's really cool. Now, let's get started. Kirk Akahoshi is a licensed psychotherapist and executive life coach in San Francisco, California. He primarily works with men through one-on-one work, sacred circles, and wilderness retreats. He is ranked as one of the best coaches by Expert.com and also voted Best of Yelp. Kirk is a California native and worked in Japan for 3 years, New York for 4 years, and traveled to over 25 countries. He continues to study and deepen his personal and professional life in psychology, spirituality, and self-development work. On March 21, 2019, Kirk was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. For part of his healing journey, he has created a YouTube channel expressing his authenticity and the reality of battling cancer. You can watch his videos on YouTube by searching for Kirk Akahoshi. Please pay close attention to what Kirk is about to share, as it might change your life. Welcome, Kirk, and thank you so much for accepting my crazy idea to bring you on this podcast during this time. I have been following your posts in YouTube, and I also, your message really resonates with me. And I thought there is no better time to capture this moment in life to share with our audience than now. By coming here as a guest on the Asian Women of Power podcast, you are offering a gift about what's really important in a human life. For that, I thank you.
Thank you, Kimchi. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
So let's jump on to the questions right away. What triggered you to see a doctor now?
Well, actually, the first time that I sensed something was last year in May. I had a cramp in my abdominals, and it was really painful. So I went to ER. They actually did an X-ray and they did an ultrasound, and they couldn't find anything. And they were just like, we wanted to do more tests, but they're just like, oh, you probably have, you probably just are like passing a gallstone. And so they didn't do anything. So then almost a year later, In March, while I was working, I had this pain over by my lower right side. And then this is while I was working with clients. And every time I stood up to walk my client to the door, it just like was really painful. And so I thought, it was around the appendix. And I went to see some friends that night, and we went to some gallery. And again, I had a friend like carrying my backpack because it was just too painful. And more, I was just like, okay, if this is appendicitis, then this isn't something to mess around with. And I called advice nurse, and they agreed, well, why don't you go into the ER? And so that night, around midnight, I went to ER, and again, they did blood tests, they did an ultrasound, and they couldn't find anything. And it wasn't until they did a CT scan that they found that there was growth around my colon and lesions on my liver. And that's when I found out that I had pancreatic cancer.
Oh, wow. Wow. So do you think it's 1 year that spread that fast, or it's because of the misdiagnosis on, last year?
Well, what I hear is that pancreatic cancer is what's called a ghost cancer.
Oh,
And so what that means is that it doesn't show symptoms until much later stages. Stage 4, what that means is that it spreads. And so that's where right now it's inoperable. I think it was showing signs a year ago, and it could have grown within the past year. It could have been growing a lot longer. I've been hearing more and more how we all have cancers in our body. They just are not showing up, or that it takes a long time until big symptoms start to show up. And so, yeah, I kind of wonder if they did a CT scan back last May, whether that would have been stage 1. But it wasn't until much later that I had this really bad reaction. And that's what kind of got me motivated to go and get it checked out. But before then, I was having a lot of a lot of digestive issues for the past several months beforehand. And that's when I went to go see other different doctors, and I thought it was maybe some allergies. And I went on an elimination diet. I cut out alcohol, dairy, and gluten, and because those are like the biggest inflammatories, the biggest allergens. And I thought that would maybe help the pain that was happening in my stomach, but that wasn't it.
wow. So what went through your mind when that news is confirmed?
Well, one thing, I was really fortunate that that night before I went to ER, my wife was actually visiting friends and family on the East Coast, and I had sent this text out to all my friends, a group of 9 other individuals. And one of my friends was a nurse who just happened to be working that night, took on an extra shift, and she got so she got the text, and she got a hit. For her, it was like, oh, you know what, I should be with Kirk. And so she was able to get out of her shift early, and around 2:00 in the morning, she came to where I was in ER, and she said, yeah, nobody should sit in ER by themselves. And so right after she came, about 5 minutes later, the ER doctor came and said, Kirk, you have he just said, Kirk, you have pancreatic cancer. And so it was really blunt, and it was hard because there was no bedside manner, just like, you have this, versus, the imaging kind of looks like you may have, but we have to run further tests. It was just like, no, you have pancreatic cancer. So in a way, it was kind of a gift, because then I had to deal with it right then and there. It wasn't this, prolonged thing of, okay, well, we got to do further tests. So right then I just went into shock. And my mind just went into prepare mode of, okay, I was just thinking I have like 1 month to live. And because I've never heard about, I didn't know much about this. I just thought like, okay, the way he was saying it, I have a short time to live. what do I need to start doing? What are the loose ends? Who do I need to call? How do I shut down my business? How do I start saying goodbye? I didn't even think about like, what are the things I want to do? I just felt like I had like a small window of time. And it was just all about like tying up loose ends. And I just was, I went back and forth into just despair and shock, because right before, the few months before, I was doing the opposite. I was expanding. I was looking at expanding my business and opening up a clinic. My wife and I were thinking about expanding, but we were trying to have children, so expanding in that way. Um, and it was just like just this rug just pulled out beneath me, and it's like now the opposite is going to happen. I'm not going to have a business. I'm not going to have a family. I'm not going to have a life. And so I just went into deep despair. And fortunately, my friend Leanne, who was with me, was just really great, just being with me and letting me go into that darkness and despair. And sometimes I would go into hope and be like, well, wait, all my blood tests are positive, they're normal, but it's just a scan that's saying this. So maybe it's wrong, or maybe like I'm healthy. Um, and so it wasn't until I came home, after ER, and Leanne accompanied me, and I started doing some phone calls to, I called my wife, I called my parents, I called my brother. Um, and when they heard the news, of course, they were all just, devastated. And I think that was kind of the scariest moment. And that was I think the saddest moment for me. Um, just hearing on the other end, um, like my mom was like, "Oh, Kirk," and just hearing that sadness from my mom, and you know, um, it's like you don't want to hurt the people that you love, and that was same with like my wife. It's like I was dreading that phone call because I knew that this was like the worst, her worst fear of me dying. And I have to deliver this message that her worst fear is coming true. And just hearing those reactions, that I'm causing this pain, I think it was far more hurtful for me to hear that than grappling with, I think, my own pain. And what was amazing was, after this like brief period of shock and pain, everybody just like turned it on. And my parents were like, okay, we're going to call our family friends. They knew this woman who was who also had pancreatic cancer, who happened to be in this clinical trial. My wife, who was on the East Coast, she was like, okay, I got to start making plans. I got to figure out the fastest way back home. When I told that text message that went to my group of friends, when they started waking up, because it was about 6 or 7 in the morning, they started waking up, and by that afternoon, I had both my parents, my brother, my wife, and 8 of my friends all in my living room, all showing up. And from that point, I started to shift and getting different feedback from my friends and hearing about, how people have survived cancer, and how this seems like an anomaly that all my blood tests are showing healthy. That's when I started to switch from despair and hopelessness into, I have a chance, and I'm gonna throw everything at this, and I'm gonna beat this.
Yeah, it's really hard to. I think most of us we rather carry the pain than have to see our loved one carry the pain,
Yeah.
right? And that's especially the pain that caused by us. So I can understand what you share, and especially for parents, right? They don't want to see their children suffer. So What are the lessons from this process that you've seen today?
Um, well, one of the lessons is, I think, well, one is like shifting my perspective around cancer. So right away, um, I know that there's a whole hashtag about fuck cancer, and um, that just doesn't resonate with how I work and what and how I work with my clients. And instead, it's I bring the shadow, I bring the darkness in, and how do we incorporate it? Because that makes us a fuller being versus denying that shadow side. And so that's where I saw cancer not as an enemy, but as my spirit animal, as my spirit guide. I say spirit animal because it kind of makes it light and fun. And so by creating that relationship, then I use it as my teacher and my guide. Was it teaching me? And so one of the lessons was looking at what are all the things that I've been putting off. And now it's like, okay, I have a limited time to do this. And one of the things was I wanted to do a YouTube channel. I wanted to do videos, and I had been thinking about this for years. And I didn't put this any videos out because of perfectionism, because I thought I would say the wrong thing, being politically incorrect, uh, all these pressures. And once I got the diagnosis, it was a clear message. Okay, so do you want this emotional pain, the emotional fear of looking bad, of not being perfect, of saying something wrong, or do you want the physical pain of cancer? And I felt, oh, I can take control over this in the sense of by the more that I'm able to speak and being able to be more authentic, that's going to heal the physical pain of cancer. And so all the emotional pain started to just slip away because because those weren't actually real. That the cancer was real. And so as I started to put out my videos, I started to get a great response and people being very moved by my authenticity, by my expression. And so all those fears that I have about saying the wrong thing or not being perfect, like none of that has happened. That was all just in my head. And instead, it's been the opposite. And so that's one of the lessons is that um, a, a lot of my fears are made up and that they're just my own. But then once I put it out there, that it's usually the opposite is happening.
What about the lessons of forgiveness, letting go, or speak the truth, or fully express?
So speaking around forgiveness, seems to be directly related to intergenerational trauma. And so how this is that um, it seems like the cancer that I have shouldn't have happened to me. That pancreatic cancer happens usually in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, not something in your 40s. And once I got the diagnosis, what I found out, we did kind of a cancer history, and my great grandparents on my mom's side actually had pancreatic cancer in their 80s and eventually died from that. And that's more of a kind of a normal something to happen, but not something early as me. And so then I started to think about the intergenerational trauma, that it seems significant that they had pancreatic cancer, that they were the first generation Japanese Americans. So they came from Japan and moved to America. And so as an immigrant, that they've probably had a lot of trauma leaving Japan and also starting up life here. And then so what I think is interesting, then they had a certain type of trauma. And then the second generation, which was my grandparents, they experienced trauma during World War II when all of them were put into the internment camps. So even though they're all American, born and raised in America, American citizens, all their rights were taken away and they were put in the internment camps. And so they had that trauma. And then the third generation, my parents, they grew up in camp. my mom was born in camp and my dad was one. And so they grew up in the internment camps. And so they had that trauma. And then I'm the fourth generation. And so it seems like, so with this thing called epigenetics, which means that trauma is actually passed down in our DNA, that I still have some of this trauma in my body. And so it feels like on a spiritual level that I have an opportunity to transmute this trauma into something different, so then I don't pass this on to my children or the next generation. And I started doing this, I think, with my grandfathers, especially as I got deeper into men's work. I started to see about the masculinity and what roles that they played when they were becoming a men. And I saw in their early 20s that they were both married, had at least one child at the time, building, their families, they're starting their careers, and that's when World War II happened, and that's when everything was taken away. And so I put it upon myself that, I think with Japanese culture, there's a lot of repression of emotions. And so both my grandfathers have passed. And so I felt like it was I want to take on the role to be the vessel for their unexpressed anger and sadness, that they weren't able to express anger and sadness in that situation, and to start letting go of that. And so as I started to do that too, I started to see that a lot of times people talk about, anger and resentment also kind of fueling cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to take like a deeper look at, well, where was my anger and resentment? And so part of that I saw, oh, it's like the oppressors and the people who've oppressed me or oppressed my people. And so I was doing some ceremonial work with a group of people. And so while I was doing that, at the beginning, I put out an intention of, how do I forgive my oppressors? Because there's a lot of anger about the war and the internment camps and all this. And during that ceremony, what happened was there was another guy, a friend of mine that was in the circle. During the ceremony, he came right and sat right next to me, and he was just crying and sobbing. And he said, Kirk, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. And I'm so ashamed. And I was like, why do you feel that way? They're from all the time that we've been together, that I've known you, you've never done anything that's ever been offensive at all. But he was just overwhelmed with guilt. And what he said was, I'm so sorry for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And even though, he was not responsible for that, he was taking responsibility as a white person, as a white male, and even though he was Jewish, and so and his people were put into camps during World War II, but he felt like he needed to take responsibility and apologize to me and ask for forgiveness about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so that just kind of turned everything around for me. It was like, wait, here I was asking for, how do I forgive my oppressors? And the person symbolizing the oppressor was actually asking for my forgiveness. And we just cried and cried, and it was just so cathartic and healing to have that happen. And so after we had that exchange, there was a Chinese American woman who was also in the circle. And so then I went directly to her and I said, Wendy, I just want to really own what the Japanese people did to you, did to you and your people, with all the different atrocities and like the raping of Nanking and all the horrible things that the Japanese people did to the Chinese people. And it was similar. Like we both just cried, and she gave me forgiveness. And so this whole lesson around how we are both the oppressors and we are both repressed, or the oppressed, and that we might not have been the direct people who've done this, but to really heal is that if we, this generation is, or any generation, can take ownership of that, because the act of owning it and the act of going to the people that were hurt and asking for forgiveness is actually a very healing thing for, I think, the whole, for the whole culture. That maybe the people who are actually the culprits may never do this, um, which sucks, but we still can have a profound impact. And I kind of think of, do you remember Standing Rock? And you
Mhm.
had how there was, like at Standing Rock, there was a bunch of American veterans that went to the chiefs, the Native American chiefs, and asked for forgiveness about how, the early settlers and Americans just really treated the Native Americans, horribly, and asked for forgiveness. And so I thought it was like a similar thing, and that just that action alone is going to help future generations to go beyond this.
Yeah, when you share that, I can see in the past, right? So I'm Vietnamese, right? So yes, in Vietnam, the Japanese has been there for 100 years,
Yeah.
and the Chinese has been there for 1,000 years, and the French also been there less, maybe 10 or 15 years. I forgot the the history, the number. Um, and then the American. So it's uh it's 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 really difficult to see that we are all we are all beat up the weak one, right, at that time, one time on the other, and we allow greed to do the unhuman things. So I think I totally agree with you that the way to heal it is to practice forgiveness. And yes, in my work, I'm also want to do that too. Or maybe I'm thinking of sharing that practice on one of my podcasts. It's about forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness, and ask for forgiveness, even though you are not directly done something to the other person.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing, Kurt.
Yeah.
So, have you asked the question why you and why now?
Yeah. I think the why me. Um, so I think it's different, from, I think, a lot of people, where sometimes this happens like, well, why me? And I think I kind of, I didn't sink into that so much of the, like it shouldn't have happened, but kind of taking more responsibility of it. It just seemed kind of odd that, like, well, why actually now in this point of time? Because I was doing all this personal development and spiritual work to expand, to be bigger, to be more authentic, um, to expand my business. I've been doing this intergenerational trauma with my grandfathers, and so it's like, well, I'm doing all the right things. So why does it happen to me right now? And the only thing that I could get from that was that the universe was saying to me, Kirk, we need you out there more fully expressed now than later. That the process that you are doing to become fully expressed, it's taking too much time, and that the fastest way that we're going to get you fully expressed is that you got to go through this hard thing called cancer, that you're going to learn lessons, you're going to see what see your inner strength, what you're about, you're going to learn new things about who you are, you're going to have so many more lessons, that once you're past this, you're going to be you're going to be more fully expressed. This is the quickest way you're going to do that, and we need your light out there sooner than later. Um, and that's just kind of what I see on the spiritual level, is that we're at this time where there's a lot of darkness out there, and I feel I'm one of the light bearers. And so the faster I get there to be a stronger light, then that will help to create more balance out there in the world.
Yeah, I think so. I think in the previous slide you say, I will be the warrior. I'm gonna take this role and I'm gonna charge, and then other people will follow me. Oh, yeah. So, what message do you want others to hear and take to heart? Is there a specific group that you want this message to reach?
Um, I guess I think I can break that down to two things. Um, I mean, and there's a couple things that I want people to know. Well, first, like what I want people to know. One, just so more specifically with health, is to really advocate for yourself. Um, and this just applies to anyone, is that I think before the diagnosis, I I gave my power up to doctors, and that I had this. I think most of us feel like, okay, doctors are the experts on your health, and so therefore, whatever they say, it's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to follow. Um, is to really advocate for yourself. If you have an intuition, or or if you think something is different, that they're human. They might be experts in medicine, but they don't know everything. And where when I first had my first diagnosis, or when I went to the emergency room a year ago for that pain, well, my wife Jackie was like, "I think you have, pancreatic cancer," but all the doctors like, "No, like we're gonna do these tests, and we don't, it's like there's nothing." But it's like, oh, if we really advocated that at that point, then we might have caught it early and say, no, well, that's what you think, but you know what? I really want, and I really want to push for a CT scan. Hey, this is my health. I'm paying for it anyway. Um, you know, and so to be way more proactive with your health. And I've seen that in this treatment too, that I'm getting more of a voice. I'm pushing back because there was something where my white blood cells were down for one of my treatments. So therefore I couldn't have chemo that week. And so they were going to give me a shot, which boosts up my white blood cells. And anyway, my wife was like, well, do we have to give him another shot? Because it's been a whole 2 weeks before his next, my next chemo. Can we take a blood test instead of taking this shot? Like, because there's going to be side effects, and Kirk already has too much in his body. They're like, well, this isn't part of the protocol. But my wife was just like, I don't care if it's a protocol. This is my husband, why can't we do it? And so they agreed. And so we got a blood test, and my white bloods were fine. They were back really high. So I didn't need to take the shot. And so we actually taught the doctors as well. And so they're like, well, thank you for pushing back. And so that's one lesson that I want to teach people is that to take control over your health and get second opinions. And I have a whole group of people. I have Eastern, medicine doctors, and I have alternative medicine doctors, and I have nutritionists and other pharmacists, and psychiatrists that are just my friends and family that could give me more information than just the doctors that I currently have. So that's one thing that I want to say. um, and then I think you asked about like a certain group that I'm speaking to, and um, I think this is where I was really happy and honored that you'd asked me for your podcast to come on again, because you speak to Asian women, and I know probably a lot of Asian men too, just Asians, listen to your podcast. and and so I think there's a cultural piece that I really want to speak to, and it may be different. Well, yes, we're all different, and maybe me being fourth generation is also different than being different generations. But I still feel that there's some underlying cultural things that get tricky in American culture, and so things like I feel like biting my tongue, and about not rocking the boat. Um, you know, that we're quote unquote the model minority, that I feel this has contributed to my cancer. And um, if I, when I was living in Japan, all that stuff worked because that's the culture, that we live in a collective society, that I don't have to say, hey, I did this. Somebody else is going to say, oh, Kirk, you did this, you did this thing. Thank you. I don't have to be the one promoting myself. Or I don't always have to look out for myself, that, in a collective society, people are always asking, oh, how are you doing? Or there's a cautious, everybody's looking out for everyone. But being an American, it's an individualistic culture, and so it's different. And so if we don't speak up, that oftentimes then we're passed over, or we don't get what we want. Or I'm hearing this a lot from my clients, is that they're the ones doing all the work, and somebody else is stealing their ideas, or are the ones that are claiming, oh, I did this, yet my clients are the one who actually did the work. And the person who's higher up or talks better is the one who's claiming the work. And so I feel like those are the things that kind of cause one, causes anxiety, and causes stress, and causes frustration. And when we don't express that, that's very harmful on a physical level. And so speaking up, I believe speaking up and fighting for ourselves, getting that visibility, speaking our mind, I think in American culture, that's what's healthy and that's what's needed. By not expressing ourselves, I think we're really hurting ourselves. It doesn't work that way here. Maybe it might work within the Asian communities, and within that Asian community, because you're still in that mindset. But I think in the broader context, that doesn't. And so that's part of some of the work that I've been doing myself, and also with my clients, about how to navigate this bicultural existence.
Yeah, I'm on that work too. I
Yeah.
promote people to speak up, right? Speak up, show up, and stand up for who you are, what you're standing for. So let's talk about fun stuff. Who gave you the idea of dressing up for chemotherapy treatment?
Yeah. I just kind of came up with it. Uh, it just, chemo is such a harsh thing. And I just thought, you know what, if I'm going to be doing this, like, I have a lot of fun clothes and I have a lot of fun costumes. And same thing with full expression. It's like I've held back from wearing my fun clothes because, well, how am I going to be received? Are some people going to be looking at me like, oh, that's weird, who's that guy? Um, and so I just said, screw it. You know what? Like, this is an opportunity for me just to have fun. And so I thought, hey, every chemo that I do, I'm going to dress up as something. And my philosophy has just been, well, I want to express a part of me. We all have different aspects of who we are, different parts of our personality. Sometimes, so I dressed up more kind of as a warrior. Another one, I dressed up in a unicorn onesie, and that was really fun and playful. Uh, and and so it's just a way that to make that day fun, because I'm going into something that I know it's helping me fight the cancer, but afterwards it's like I know I'm going to be out for at least 1 to 2 days, just out of fatigue, or just not feeling good in my body, or any other side effects. So it's going in with the mentality of either this warrior spirit or this fun spirit, or whatever my costume is trying to evoke in me. But like, okay, I'm good now, and let's approach it that way. Um, and even there's been twice where, I had to be really real with myself, where I set that rule of, okay, I'm going to dress up. And twice I didn't, the last 2 times, because one, I was feeling like crap. And I was like, you know what? A bigger principle of mine is to be authentic and to be loving myself. So instead of forcing myself to dress up as something, I'm just going to dress up and just be comfortable and be me and be pouty. And so that was my lesson. Um, So again, yeah, so it started out with something that was fun, and then it was something about how do I attune to myself in that day and what's going to help me get through this day.
So, how did that help you and your family members? Did it bring their mood up and you know?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Because yeah, it's fun, and usually all the nurses and the staff get a kick out of it. And now they know my face, so they're like, "Oh, where was your bathrobe? How come you're not wearing your bathrobe today?" Um, and then I have people too that are also taking me to chemo, and we're talking about having costumes, dressing up together. And so I think it just lifts everybody's spirits up, that we don't always have to stay at this very serious, cancer mode, that we can just be like, hey, today we're just going to have fun.
Yeah, I think it's important to experience that, right? When we are down, we don't feel good. Don't drag other people down because we that's where we are at the stage we are at. So how many more treatments do you have?
So that's up in the air. Um, so cancer is very individual. And so I started 2 months ago on chemo and immunotherapy. I'm on this clinical trial, and I've been on it for 2 months. And I just got a CT scan on Monday, and so I won't know the results till next Monday. There's all these different factors that they're looking at to see what my cancer is after 2 months of chemo and immunotherapy, and then they're going to readjust. So if there was a miracle, maybe it showed the cancer's gone, and then great. So then I'm done with chemo. But maybe it shows it advanced. So we got to retool the treatments, or it showed slowing down or whatever. And um, so about every 2 months, they're going to be doing a CT scan to just check in and see where I'm at, how big the tumors are, and what are the tumors doing? Are they shrinking? Are they just on a pause? Are they growing? And so I won't know. But they do say around 8 or 9 months that after doing chemo, that oftentimes they will just give a break to the patient after 8 or 9 months, because there's like a cumulative effect. That the chemo and all this medicine's been in your body for so long that has some side effects too. And so taking a longer. So right now, I have like every round is 4 weeks, and the first round is chemo and immunotherapy, and the second week is chemo, third week is chemo, and the fourth week there's a break. Um, and so after like 8 or 9 months, I think they give a much longer break, whether it's like a month or a couple months, I'm not sure. Um, so I'm not looking that far ahead yet, but when we get to it, we'll assess and see, do we continue going past that, or we give myself a break?
So in the meantime, how would you live your life differently?
Well,
Do you
the
plan to?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest change that I've had to make is, um, and it's kind of forced upon me, is I have to live in the present moment. And like that, I can't plan ahead. And that's just been the hardest thing for me, because I'm very ambitious and I'm very goal oriented. Um, and like you said, like, oh, how many more treatments do you have? I would love to know that. So then I know, okay, after this much, this is what I'm going to do. I don't know. Or just even like this, our interview, this podcast, how you're like, how it's like, I want to do it. And I needed to let you know, like, the caveat that I might have to cancel the day of, that every day there might be a new side effect that comes up, and so therefore I have no energy and I'm just laid out, or I'm just in pain, and so I don't want to talk. um, and so that's been the biggest thing. I might be able to plan like a week in advance, but again, everybody that I plan something in advance, I have them all give me a caveat of check in with me in that morning. And I'll let you know whether we can go ahead and do that thing that we planned. Or if you're coming to visit, know that I might only be able to see you for 15 minutes. That might be my energy level. And okay, maybe 30, maybe 45, and maybe an hour max. And so it's really teaching me about one is that okay, I got to be present because that's all I have. And I think two is having faith, really trusting that the universe has my back, that when I'm ready to work, that things are going to show up. Um, but that my anxiety right now and trying to plan ahead and trying to figure that out really isn't going to help me right now. That's actually a waste of time and energy. And especially right now, I don't have a lot of energy. And so things that I was able to do, like I used to always like to multitask and be efficient and do 10 things in a day and feel really good about it. Now I got to look at my day and what's the one essential thing that I want to do? Um, and just know that that might be the only thing that I can do today, like this interview. Okay, like, in a normal day, I'd plan, okay, I have you as an interview. I'm going to, make these other client calls. I'm going to do some other sessions. I'm going to go and wash my dishes. I'm going to run some errands. And now it's just like, okay, if I get through this interview, great. Then that's all I can do. The rest of the day, like, I'm not counting on much. I'll probably just, maybe I'll crash. And so I really have to lower my expectations on my capacity on what actually I can do.
And thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Kimchi.
So, do you have any regret about your life right now?
Oddly, no. Um, I think I feel very fortunate, and I I think every decade that I've lived it well. Like I wanted to do when I was in high school, I wanted to do all the high school things. When I was in college, I wanted to do all the college things. And in my early 20s, I wanted to do all those things that people in their 20s do. And so that when I'm done with that decade, I can look back and I can be nostalgic about it, but I don't necessarily feel like I needed to do that again. Like I was in a fraternity in college, and I partied hard and did all the fraternity thing. Yet, so I look back at it and with fond memories. Yet, I would not go back and do those things again, um, because I felt like I did it to my heart's content. Um, so I think in that way, yeah, I don't have a lot of regrets. I mean, I think I have small regrets, like I don't know. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, because that question came up to me. I was like, oh, I don't know my last regret. But then I do remember that my grandmother, she was 100 years old, and I got a call from, or somebody in my family said, I think she might be passing in the next few days. And uh, and I was driving and I was tired and I could have stopped by, where she was living. Um, and I just remember like, I'm just tired. I'd rather go home and like just relax. And in the next couple of days, like she passed. And, I had seen her maybe a week or two before, but like, I think that was maybe like one specific regret that I didn't, it's like, see the opportunity there and be like, well, okay, is this for real? Like, is she passing? And if not, like, I shouldn't, who cares? I should have just went and just to be with her one last time. So I think that's, yeah, I would say that would be a specific regret. But as far as I think bigger regrets, life regrets, I don't.
Yeah. We have little regrets like that. Sometimes we just make the decision. We didn't think that might be the last chance or last opportunity to complete with that person, right? We say, oh, maybe tomorrow or maybe next month. Maybe she's gonna live, for a few more years, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. And it happened. I think it happened a lot to young people, right? I think as people growing older, like 40, 50, 60, they seize the opportunity is there, and they don't miss that kind of opportunity to basically complete with the other person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you need currently right now and in the near future, and how can viewers and listeners supporting you?
So I did one video on YouTube, which talks about how to support me, and I think I laid out like 4 different things. Like number 1 was I view my healing as communal healing, not just individual healing, but communal healing. And so when people watch my videos or hear about my story or read my posts, is if it has impacted you in a positive way, and it's started to change your life in a positive way, I love to hear that, because that kind of gives me fuel to get through some of these hard times, to know that I can bear down, I can get through this grueling thing, because I know that it's just not my healing, but it's also your healing, and to hear that ripple effect. So sending me those comments, emailing me or putting a comment on a post or on YouTube. I think the second thing was, if somebody feels moved to support me financially, the GoFundMe, I have a GoFundMe campaign, and you can just put in my name into GoFundMe, and that helps me financially, because right now, like, there's, as you can imagine, ton of new medical expenses and all these different things that I need to just maintain where I'm at. And also that I've put a pause on my practice. And so I have no income right now. And so my wife has to now be the bread earner. And so the money is helping me kind of give me more breathing room to just focus on myself, versus like hurrying up to try to get back to, to work with clients, to have an income so that I can pay for rent and all this stuff. And then also about, I think a third thing is about, I think people who are closer to me is that there's just, when people come to visit, that sometimes just little things that I really need help with, like just washing dishes, simple things like that, or doing errands for me, going grocery shopping, those simple things, those daily tasks that, like, I would tell you, like, I'd be so efficient in doing those things, I can't. And placing it just on my wife, it's just like, she already works full time and, has her own stuff, and it's like, she's got to take care of my stuff too. It's like, it's hard. So sometimes, that's what's been nice. Like, we've been creating a system where our friends and family that live near us are doing that now, are stepping in to take me to appointments, to do my laundry, or to do the dishwashing, to, cook dinners for us and bring them. Yeah. And I think for people, the newer viewers, I think what would be supportive for me is around, if you like my YouTube videos and you like this podcast, is about, liking them and reposting them and sending them to friends, because I think I want to get, this message out, and I feel like it's only going to happen is by, all the different people that are viewing this. Like, I can only do so much myself, but that will start to, spread this message. And I believe that as it starts to spread, that's also going to help support me and maybe new opportunities for how I might start to work in the future.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so grateful that you are here in this interview with us, and I'm sending you healing power, healing prayer to win this thing. For our listeners and viewers, you can follow Kurt's progress on this YouTube channel. Just search for Kirk Akahoshi. All right. Until next time, live life loud. Thank you.
Thank you.